Somewhere by the riverbank, resting on a patch of damp sand just above the waterline, there was a small wooden box. It hadn't been there the day before. The river moved steadily past it, sunlight flickering across its closed lid, as though it were trying to read whatever secrets might be inside. Up at the country cottage, quite unaware of the box waiting patiently by the reeds, the bunnies were cosy and calm. Rosco, the cottontail bunny, had just finished his breakfast and was rinsing out his egg cup, placing it carefully on the draining board beside his mug. Outside, the morning was yawning and stretching its sunlight limbs, and the sky was forget-me-not blue. It was the kind of morning that didn't hurry you along. Indeed, it felt like a perfect day for a wandering walk. Floyd made watercress sandwiches and wrapped them in cotton napkins. Caratina washed and dried some apples, and Berry prepared a flask of elderflower cordial. Everything was carefully placed inside a knapsack, along with their curly straws. Now the bunnies were ready. Before long, they were heading down the cobbled path that led away from the cottage. They strolled past the hedge and through the long grass that swished its feathery tips through their fingers as they headed towards the river. They walked side by side, seed heads bobbing on stalks and buttercups smiling as they went on their leisurely way. They could see the river was moving steadily when the path brought them alongside. Sunlight danced on the water, the ripples glimmering and glittering. Reeds leaned and whispered to one another. Smooth river stones clicked and clacked underfoot. The bunnies often walked here. The riverbank felt as familiar as the cottage and their garden. They had paused to watch the blue flash of a kingfisher dart across the river. And that was when they saw it. Laying on the shore was a small wooden box. The bunnies took a few steps forward. The box was dark with age, its corners rounded smooth, as if it had been handled many times. One side was still wet from the river, but it looked intact and solid. The wooden box was simply sitting there, as though it had been placed carefully, even though it clearly had not. Rosco crouched down. "Well," he said quietly, "there's a thing, if ever I saw one." The bunnies didn't touch it straight away. They stood for a moment and listened to the river, as if the water itself might explain how the little wooden box had found its way onto the shore. "It looks like it's travelled a little way," said Millie Moonbeam. "And then decided to rest," said Berry. Rosco nodded. "The river does that sometimes. It carries things along until they're ready to stop. Sticks and twigs and leaves, if you please, and now this wooden box." After a while, they knelt down and looked more closely. The lid was fastened with a simple brass clasp. There was no lock, nor name carved into the wood. "It could be a lunchbox," Berry said hopefully. "But we don't want soggy sambos." "Or maybe it's a box for toys," said Floyd. "Or perhaps something someone keeps safe," Rosco said. Carefully, very carefully, Rosco lifted the lid. Inside were handwritten letters in the most delicate swirling blue ink. The letters were stacked neatly, tied together with a piece of string that had been knotted twice, the way someone does when they don't want it to come undone by accident. The paper was a little crinkled at the edges, but dry. Whoever had packed them had done it with care. "Oh my," said Caratina softly. Rosco lifted the bundle just enough to see beneath it. There was nothing else inside, just the letters. Enough to fill the box, and no more. "This box wasn't meant for the river," Rosco said. "It must have slipped in by mistake." He loosened the string just enough to open the top letter. Not to pry, just to understand. The writing looped and curled in ovals and swirls, and showed that it was a wise paw that had held the pen. The letter started. "My dear friend, I hope the water flows clear and kind, and your den is warm and dry." Rosco smiled. The letter went on to say that the badger, who had written the letters, had gone beyond the woods and over the hill. The ground there had been bare, the letter said. There had been no bird song, no hoot of owl, and no chirp of crickets to herald the day. There had been too much wind and decidedly too few trees. So, he had written, he had started planting. The letter continued. "I planted 3 young oaks today. One needed a little help to stand straight, so I tied it gently and promised to check on it tomorrow." The letter didn't say when it had been written. It didn't need to. It spoke of earthwormy, sun-bathed soil, pattering rain, and evenings that were quiet and peacefully calm. At the bottom, the badger had written, "Please keep these letters safe for me. They'll tell the story of the woods beyond the hill and how they came to be. I like knowing they're with you." Rosco folded the letter and placed it back on top of the others. "These letters belong to someone who cares," he said. "Someone who cares very much." "One of the river folk?" Millie Moonbeam asked. Rosco nodded. "An otter, by the sound of it. A good friend of the badgers, I expect." They looked at the river again. It flowed past, as it always had, ripples smoothing the stones in the same way it had done for countless years before. The bunnies imagined the box slipping from the river's edge, drifting a short way, then settling here, not far from the otter's den, but far enough to be out of sight. "The otter won't know yet," said Millie Moonbeam. "He won't even be looking." "No," Rosco agreed, "which means we've got plenty of time to make sure everything returns to its place without the least bit of fluster or haste." They closed the box and fastened the clasp again. The wood felt cool and solid beneath their paws. "We shouldn't move it very far," Rosco said after a moment, "but we shouldn't leave it here either. We could wrap it in the cotton napkins our sandwiches are in. They'd keep it safe and dry." "Good idea, Berry. Let's stop for a bite to eat and then wrap up the wooden box and tuck it beneath the willow tree, just above the reach of the water." And that's just what the bunnies did. They ate their watercress sandwiches in companionable silence and sipped elderflower cordial through their curly straws. They wrapped the little wooden box and placed it beneath the willow, marking the place with a round white stone. "Tomorrow," Rosco said, "we'll walk along the river and ask." The bunnies nodded. That felt right. They stood for a little longer, listening to the water and the wind in the reeds. Somewhere downstream, an otter was arranging river stones in front of his den, large by the water, small by his front door, quite unaware that something important had gone missing, and just as unaware that it had already been found. When the bunnies turned back towards the path home, the river went on flowing, carrying sunlight with it, and the wooden box waited patiently under the willow tree. That night, with patchwork quilts tucked under chinnigans, the bunnies dreamed of the woods beyond the hill, and the kind badger who planted new trees. All was snug. All was well. Night, night.